tips and tricks and sort of overall big picture ideas for families and parents preparing for the transition to summer. So I think overall, I would say balance is what like the big picture is, and how I think about orienting families to that is the need to discuss the transition with your kids, doesn't matter their ages, ahead of time. So now that we're about 2 or 3 weeks out from summer, depending on your school district, now is a good time to talk with kids about what is going to change, how it's going to change, expectations in the home might change, right? Routines are going to change, bedtimes and screen time are going to change. So one big picture thing that I think about that can get people ready for balance in summer is starting to orient and talk and having those discussions ahead of time with our kids. Another thing I think about that I mentioned that a lot of people get hypersensitive to as parents is this idea of screen time in summer. And for that, I would say it is a balance of acceptance and change. There is no doubt about it, it's here to stay. So the more we can embrace that and cultivate a relationship even to screen with our kids, that can be hugely helpful. So things like the function of the behavior matters, right? You sit in a dark basement playing video games for 7 hours is very different than your kid and you playing a video game together, or getting on and doing cosmic kids yoga, with your kiddos, or watching a movie and then also bringing in like those themes into your family. So I like watching a documentary on the octopus in the ocean, and then going down to the Discovery World and doing the tanks and watching all the animals and things there. And then watching Finding Nemo, right? Like the way in which we bring in screen, I think is helpful, right, from our own perspective, especially since a lot of us did not have access to screen, nearly as much screen or the same kinds of things digitally that our kids do. So thinking about the fact that like when they come home from school, we ask questions such as, how was your day? What happened at school? I think in that repertoire needs to be, and what was the funniest thing you saw on TikTok today? Or what did you learn on X social media platform? So that is built into the discussion of what's happening in your kids' worlds, because it is a part of our children's lives, whether we like it or not. Another thing that is key to success in summer is sleep, right? So we've got a lot of parents get concerned about screen time. The next thing is sleep. And sometimes those things go hand in hand. So a number one key factor that links sleep and the use of devices and screen and social media and things is getting those devices out of our kids' rooms, right? If we do nothing else in the research, that would be hugely helpful. So starting that early and those expectations clear and ahead of time can save a lot of trouble as kids get older. So let's say we remove screen and we're talking about what does night routine look like? Are there exceptions to bedtimes, right? On trips or vacations, or when grandma and grandpa come to stay, or whatever it might be true for you and your family. So being able to target sleep by talking about how it might change, what that will look like, and really giving yourself and your children grace to adjust to the change. For younger kiddos, that might take 2 or 3 weeks. For older kids, that might be a week that they transition into summer and sort of adjust and acclimatize to the new normal. Likewise, be prepared that 2 or 3 weeks before the end of summer for little kids, we want to be starting to really talk about and look at and orient to what's going to change going back into fall, and maybe a week ahead of time with adolescents that we start to have them get back on the typical sleep-wake cycles that they are normally on. Another thing is, I think, really thinking about how to engage with our children in summer. So when we think of things that we used to love or are important to us that we connect to from a nostalgic perspective from our own childhoods, is how do we bring that in with our kids and meet them where they're at, right, with expectations. So if you love going to the zoo as a child, right, that we do that with our kids and we make sure that the expectations around that, right, that they had a good night's sleep the night before, and that the dose, right, and the timing matter. So that little kids, we don't want them to be at the zoo when it's 78 for 8 hours, because kids, right, will push back in one way or another. So really making sure that in order to balance, right, what we think of summer and embrace that, especially in a generation that has a hard time cultivating play on their own, we really got to get creative, right? Sometimes we need to get on their level. We need to plan things together. And maybe really even think about from their point of view, what does quality time look like? And how do we bring that in, even in teeny tiny ways, right? So I think that a lot of parents feel like when they talk about those things ahead of time with kids, which goes back to the orienting, that like, what's the bucket list for the summer, both for you and for your kids, and how do you bring those things in regularly so that by the end of the summer, everybody feels like they got some of their bucket list taken care of and showed up. I think the last thing I would say is compassion for ourselves and for our kids. Adjustment to any change, even awesome change, can be stressful. So as we think about offering ourselves compassion and pivoting, right, when we make some of these plans and we orient ahead of time and we talk about how routines will change, there will still be inevitable hiccups along the way. Life is what happens when you're making other plans. So being able to pivot and say, okay, we're going to redirect here, or we're going to put that one aside because all of a sudden, right, this became more important. Which is wonderful modeling for our children. So if we're modeling flexibility, right, we're talking about these things on the front end. We're also modeling our own screen time use and our own sleep patterns and bringing our children into those discussions when it is effective and when it makes sense. I think we are essentially coping ahead for what could happen as we adjust to the wonderful time of year in Wisconsin, which is summer. So good luck, everybody, with these transitions, and know that there's support in Ozaki Family Services and other folks in the community if you find yourself having questions or needing help.